My only real friend in Elysium, Iowa was Peter Porligas. He was Italian, but he wasn't, because he was adopted. His mom was a one-woman assembly line of food, feeding us cheese-laden breaded dishes bathed in olive oil with names that I couldn't begin to pronounce, let alone spell. Taste so different from anything I'd ever put in my mouth. I was never sure they were supposed to be eaten. She had hair in places that you normally saw bare, and there was something around her eyes, a Mediterranean depth that belied any Midwest roots. Her ankles were as big as my father's, but she had an olive beauty that you could make out beneath the surface. His dad was stout and had a Boston accent, despite being from Missouri. He always sat by the TV with a pipe and nodded at Peter and me as we go in and out of the house, tapping his pipe loudly on the end table as we forgot to shut the door behind us. Peter had reddish hair and freckles, with a rabbit's overbite and a build of someone who tried hard to be athletic, despite all that nature had held back. You could see in Peter's body the things he tried hard to be. They reached out like arms grasping for something perpetually out of reach. It earned him the nickname Little Italy. One afternoon behind a dead barn, he taught me how to masturbate. I pretended I didn't know how. We plowed through the arcana of boyhood archetypes together, and he made me promise we'd always stick together and never let the outside world get to us. We were both outcasts, me by choice, sort of, and him by defiance of his will. He tried so hard to fit in that it made the chances of such a thing happening hopeless. I'm not sure if he settled for me or if there was some kind of magnetics that brought us together. Either way, he would shed tears in front of me, about his brother who beat him up, about his height, about everything that he kept inside. He'd always end these confessionals by pretending it was all in jest. But there was a spark of knowing in his eyes, a silent pact he was making with me. When we were at school though, and the kids would get bored and start picking on him, he'd turn on me, every time. Hey, I saw Indiana taking a bath with his mom. Things that had no basis, in fact, but would do the trick in rerouting the attention and ridicule from himself for a few minutes. For my part, I would take it in stride, either letting it wash over me, or in braver moments, murmuring back to the biggest kid, who'd ask me in a mocking bellow so that everyone could hear, "Is it true you take baths with your mom?" "No," I remember answering one day, after my father had disappeared. "It was your mom." That incident sent me to the nurses and then to Dr. Handler's for stitches. Peter would never disclose to the others any real confession I made to him. The ones he let loose were from out of nowhere. I wonder if they were, in part, things that were true about his own life, things he was embarrassed about. I figured he never let slip anything we talked about, thinking he wouldn't maintain the bond and trust we had. Whenever we were alone, we'd never discuss it. Why he'd turn on me, make up those lies. Partly because I think both of us knew why, but the words weren't ready for our pre-adolescent lips. One day we were playing War in the Woods behind his house with his father's old army gear, which we'd snuck out of the garage. It had just rained the day before and everything was mushy, except the air, which was crisp. I had captured him and he was standing over his body, his arms pinned under my feet. He kept saying I could wear the gear next, but it would always be 5 more minutes. I held in my hands the hard metal helmet he'd been wearing, and we looked at each other. It was a dull brown-green, and I held it over him, examining it like a spoil of war. As he looked up at me from the ground, I caught his eye, and both by accident and on purpose, I let go of it. The hard-stained helmet came down on his face, catching his buck rabbit teeth and making a clink that echoed like a BB gun hitting a bell. I watched the sound escape through the branches above like a bird fleeing. He let out a loud "ah" that rose in volume as he got up and felt his lips, which were bleeding. I was frozen with shock, not quite believing what I had just done. I didn't do that, was the first thing I said. When he took his hands away from his mouth, I could see both his front teeth had been chipped. "My mom's gonna fucking kill you," he lisped. I watched a speck of blood fly out as he spoke and land on my soiled white t-shirt, in between the dots of mud. It almost blended in. And I thought to myself, maybe no one will notice. By the time they found the cancer in his stomach, it was the size of a baseball. He spent 4 weeks at the hospital up in Iowa City and then died. The day after our 8th grade graduation party, where I kissed Sally Potter behind Ed Nance's gazebo. I never visited him in the hospital, not once. Not because I was scared or angry, not because I didn't love him. Things were just moving in their own direction, and I didn't know I had a choice, or maybe I didn't want to know. I saw his mom. She came to our graduation and wailed the whole time like the woman in those spaghetti westerns or The Godfather would, dressed in black and huddled in the midst of consoling arms. Her olive was just a dull green now. I avoided her the whole time, like I had when she came to our house, offering to take me to the hospital so I could go see Peter. I was always gone or hiding when she came. My mom never pressured me, maybe because my father. Maybe for some other reason I don't understand. I was coming out of the bathroom after the service. Everyone had left. I was staying back to help clean up in exchange for a missing PE credit I had needed for graduation. She was there waiting. No one else was in the gym where our ceremony had been. The silence ricocheted off the walls like the sound of basketballs dribbling. I was cemented to the ground, the bathroom door swinging behind me. I wondered where all these women were that had been consoling her, propping her up. I hadn't seen that she could stand on her own before. She looked like a black cloud being carried along. Now she stood squat, suspended by those ankles, girders propping up the leaning tower. And I wondered if it was evolutionary biology that gave her those ankles, knowing she would one day have to support herself under a weight that normal anatomy would never have allowed. She broke what seemed to be an infinite silence. He loved you, Gary. He loved you. I wish I could have cried, broken down right there and held her, or at least have her hold me. But I was silent. I couldn't even move. After what felt like minutes, she left me standing there, and I continued to stand there for another half hour, unmoving, unblinking, until my mother came in looking for me. Gary, you've been waiting outside for 20 minutes. I'll walk, Mom. Just go. As I watched her leave, I thought of how he turned on me, those moments in the playground. I wondered if somehow some part of him knew we needed this balance. But it didn't really seem like balance. It just seemed like air. A distance that was there, but that I couldn't see.